My guest today is Porier, a 5-time TEDx speaker, a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author, a Success Magazine emerging entrepreneur, and he is also the founder of Blue Talks. In today's episode, we talk about his new anticipated book, The Enlightened Passenger. Welcome to Lifeology.
Thanks so much, James. It's brilliant and amazing to be back.
Well, thank you. There was so much I had to say. I edited it all down just so I could say all that because it was a tongue twister for me. But you've been on my show multiple times. You're a good friend of mine, and I'm really happy to help you promote this book. In fact, this book here itself was actually started as a podcast. Tell me more about that.
Well, so yes, it did. And I thought that was, there was a reason behind it. It was very intentional. So there's a show called, what is it called now? I think it's called, I'm looking over at my shelf because I think I have.
I do it all the time too, I forget.
It's called, I think it's called The Way Back to You. And it's. Okay. Have you ever heard of the Enneagram?
Yeah. Enneagram, yeah.
Excuse me. The Enneagram, this podcast, it's about the nine, what are the, nine Enneagram numbers, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. Yes, I can't remember either.
Maybe it's called the road. I think it's called The Road Back to You. And basically, it's what they did was they launched with a podcast. So a short run podcast. Excuse me, a short run podcast. I think it was 12 episodes, and that's how they launched their book. And to this day, I mean, I think those 12 episodes were I want to say 2017. And to this day, I'll see them. They're still up on the charts. They've never released an episode since, which fascinates me. But also, so many people I talked to are like, oh, yeah, I know that book. And I realized that the biggest launch plan was to launch a short run podcast and then launch the book. And they both have the same logo and so on. So I decided I was going to do that. And two things happened that kind of went against the plan. One, I was planning for it to be short run, meaning I didn't know how many episodes, but let's say 15. Yeah. I kind of thought 15 because the idea of that show is every episode under 15 minutes. That was kind of the promise the show made. And so I thought maybe 15 episodes. But here's what happened. Because it was so short, it was easier to get some big name thought leaders on the show than I'd ever had a go of before. Yeah. And then I couldn't stop. I was like, why am I getting rid of this show? It's able to get me not better, but big names that I can't normally secure because it's such a short request of time. And so for that show, we got on it right from the jump. Deepak Chopra, who had kind of escaped me up until that point. Ken Honda, trying to think of JJ Virgin, Janet Atwood, and just a lot of really cool. Tommy Chong, Dave Hester from Storage Wars, the guy, and just a lot of cool guests. And so I was like, maybe I don't need to stop this show. So we did it, and I consider it now, James, the first round was a season. So season 1. Okay, makes sense, yeah. The plan was it was going to be short run, but here's where the other fault happened, is I was going to start selling pre-order copies of the book, and I did actually at the time. Where we ran into the hiccup is that was conservatively a year and a half before the book was released. And at the time, I thought I was going to self-publish it. So everything changed because the idea was I'll start this podcast, and while I'm still doing it, I'll launch the book. Then all the things changed. The book ends up being pushed, and now I'm doing a podcast that has no book. And so what I did was I just ran out the episodes I planned to do in the first place and stopped there and considered that season 1. So the interesting part about the show is literally now, starting Monday, we're releasing season 2. And we're going to release an episode a day, kind of like a Netflix. We're going to release an episode a day for probably 30 days, and then that'll be season 2. So it's more of a binge thing. But to answer the question, that was why we started it. It was supposed to be a short-run show that now has a life of its own because of the fact that I didn't think I would get some of these guests on. And we're about to interview Jeff Walker again. So people know Jeff is from Launch and Product Launch Formula. The second half of Tommy Chong's going to air. I did an interview recently with Brian Austin Green from 90210 and Angry Man.
I saw that. And the swipes you sent me. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to be, the full interview is going to be there. But then I'm doing an interview tomorrow with Brian, Sharna, his wife, and Randy Spelling. So kind of like the 90210
cool.
episode. So we're doing that for my book launch, but we're going to air that as part of the show. I just did an interview last week with Richard Paul Evans from the Christmas Box and Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Hansen. And these are all season 2. Mike Dooley from Notes from the Universe. And so we have a season 2 about to come out at the same time as my book is officially being launched. So what's happening now is what was supposed to happen a year and a half ago. Whenever you first brought me on to talk about the show, I truly thought I'm promoting it for a book that's about to come out, and the book never came out. And now finally the book is in my hands.
Well, it's crazy how it all works out. But I'm sure at that moment you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because, you had one plan, all of a sudden it stopped and it would change into something else. Well, congratulations. That's super exciting. I didn't realize when I had you on a while ago for the podcast that's what you're turning into for the book part, or the reason why you had the podcast. But that's very smart. It makes a lot of sense as well. To meet all those people, I mean, I've been blessed to have some of those people on my show as well. But some of those other people, all the people rather, to glean the information and the advice and the suggestions that they have. How was that for you to just sit under all that wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it sitting under the learning tree. You could call it getting to sit at the feet of giants. I think Dr. John DeMartini, that's how he describes it, sitting at the feet of giants. I mean, for me, there's two sides to it. There's what have I learned from it over the years, excuse me, and how has it impacted my life? And then there's the side of, in the bigger picture, what I guess you could say it feels like when you're getting to do that. So it feels like when you're getting to do that part first, it feels like I feel guilty. I feel like this is so strange that a person that normally charges $45,000 for a keynote to be able to say to you what they want is on with me for an hour, and I get them one-on-one, and I get to ask what I want as the audience. It feels like that should be illegal. So that side of it is what it's been like. It's like, how blessed am I to get to learn from the best at what they do in different fields, and really just for the sake of giving up time, not any money in most cases. And so that's one side of it. But then the I guess we'll call it the bigger picture for me personally is what I've learned. And in fact, this new book, 10 life lessons are shared in it. And these are the lessons I've learned during these thousands of interviews. So for me, how it's worked its way into my life is it's changed my life at its core, because it's got me to do things that I might not have ever done that have been so beneficial in my life. And at the same time, I've been able to take these things I've learned and test them in my own career and other people's careers. And they've helped me become better, figure out what works with me, for me, what doesn't work for me. But when I say the part about, take those things and internally how they could transform my life, it could be as simple as meditation. I discovered meditation before I started doing all these interviews, but when I struggled with it because I always thought you're supposed to meditate a certain way. You have that vision of up on the top of the hill, cross-legged. Even some people have arguments over whether you should use guided meditation and listen, or whether that's a crutch and you should be just sitting there in silence. And they put so many rules on meditation, which is why I feel a lot of people say I can't do it. And so doing the interviews I've done, one thing is it's allowed me to see that a lot of people that are considered meditators or mindfulness leaders do it in a different way. And so like David G., who used to work with Deepak Chopra, he calls it meditation because he says, I don't care if you lie down and you meditate and you fall asleep. That's what you need right now. He also says, let me show you in 17 seconds how you can get the benefits of meditation, because some people think it has to be hours. And the other thing is people say, I can't slow my mind down. And what I've learned is nobody can at first. Like, you're not alone. Woody Woodrow, who I interviewed years ago, said he calls it the he said, for me, he said, when I first started, he said, people said monkey mind. He said, mine was like a roided up gorilla that was stuck in a cage and kept reaching for the banana and was freaking out in the cage because he couldn't get the banana. And then J.J. Virgin, who's known for the low sugar impact or high, it's low sugar impact diet, I think. But she's known for no sugar diet, basically. And J.J., she's obviously known for helping people work out and nutrition and that. She told me when she meditates, it's like she listens to Metallica while she's working out. Oh, interesting. That's her meditation.
Oh, you'll love that then, yeah.
Yeah, and then Anthony Trucks, American Ninja Warrior, he actually said that for him, if he's out doing carpentry and stuff, which is something he normally doesn't do, like doing work around the house, that's meditation. The takeaway from all of those, James, is that meditation doesn't have to be one thing that we all do the
Yes.
same way. Well, those are the kind of things I learned from these conversations. And I think they changed my life at its core. Even lessons I learned, like the fact that most influencers, thought leaders, luminaries say no up to 20 to 50 times more than the average person. But yet I grew up as a yes person in a small town, told to do whatever people ask and figured how to do it all later. What I'm getting at is these are the things, when you ask, like, what kind of impact has it had on me? What's it done for me? These are the things it's done. It showed me a different way to live my life that I think is more effective and also has allowed me to have more fulfillment.
Yes, I can totally see that. Now, if I remember correctly, and we'll jump into the book in just a second, but if I remember correctly, you and a friend back in your hometown was sold advertisement, had some type of advertisement stuff where you sold it, and it was a small little thing, and then it grew into something bigger, and your friend decided not to do it. If I remember correctly, I'm trying to piece all that together. If that's correct, remind me, what's the difference between that young man of yourself and today? What's different and what's the same?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's funny because I could say everything's different and everything's the same. Really, as core of who I am, I still feel I'm that same person. But as far as in terms of kind of what's different, really, yeah, I'm a different person. Like that guy, that person. At the end of the day, I was always distracted. I was a hypochondriac. Had filled with generalized anxiety. I've openly shared that. And I was unsure of myself. I wasn't confident. Basically, what you're talking about too is we had a newspaper, almost like Success Magazine, but it was a publication that was in newsprint. And we launched it without any business launching it. And we started selling advertising because we found out, oh, we can't sell this paper for $2 or $3 a paper. And so we started selling advertising without having ever done that before. And we weren't good, and it wasn't good. And so Tyler was my business partner's name, still friends with him. He decided after 4 months it wasn't for him, and I had to buy him out of the business. That's kind of how I got my start. But I bring that up to say I wasn't confident. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know how to communicate effectively. Like every aspect of who I was, I would say, is different than the person I am now. Now, I say the same in the sense that I think my heart's the same. I like to believe that I grew up in a small town and I still have those same values. Like those things are the same. So the who I am probably hasn't changed much, but how I am and how I live and what I do has changed dramatically. And so, I have a different level of confidence now. Back then, I was just early on in my playing music and songwriting and stuff. And I had a girlfriend near that time, a little before that, I think, told me I was terrible. Like, ouch, you're pulling my ears, you're terrible. And years later I ended up getting nominated for a CD for Rock Recording of the Year, and that was kind of the validation that it's true that if you put in the 10,000 hour rule, you can get better than terrible. I'm not going to say master, but terrible. But
I know what you mean,
but it's like, so the person that I am today has different level of confidence. Like it's not that I feel I can do it all, but I feel I can figure it out. I hadn't spoken on a stage. Now I've spoken thousands of times. And so I feel like I can communicate my message better than I could have then. The anxiety stuff, I wasn't happy if I was filled with anxiety and hypochondria. Now, I wake up every day. I'm like the kid that loves Christmas running down the stairs when I get out of bed. And so I can honestly say, and this goes back to my original answer, is everything's the same and everything's different. I'm a different person on the outside and how I live and everything else that way. I like to believe I'm the same person I was back then, small town person who really cares about people, who still really wants to say yes, even if he knows when he has to say no. But I'm still that person. I'm still that person that writes a song and will say openly it's terrible when it is. And I think I got that from people being honest with me, because the truth is she did me a favor when she told me I was terrible, because it made me work to get better. Although her and I weren't meant to be long-term, because I also don't think you can say you're terrible and then imply that you can't get better and walk away from the person that you're supposed to care about. But at the same time, it was a motivator. So different person, still a little bit the same.
I really like that. I understand what you're saying as well. I mean, it makes sense that who you are is based off of the values and the core values that you had as a young man. And all right, so I have one more question, and then we'll definitely transition. So, we're talking about sitting at the feet of giants. You have a lot of people that you've worked with, and you've really helped a lot of their careers. Do you I know you wouldn't call yourself a giant, but do you realize the impact that you've had in other people's lives?
This is an interesting one for me, especially small town guy who, when I grew up, there was a saying, not where I'm at, but hours away, my friend he grew up with said that no man, and I would add, or woman these days, but no man shall rise above the masses. And the idea there was basically their way of saying, don't get too big for your britches. Like, in other words, but there's an inner negative to that too, right, James? Because it's saying nobody should try to achieve higher than they are. Like, if you try to achieve higher, we're going to tear you down. There's that side of it. But there's also the side when you're raised like that of thinking, like, don't ever brag about your achievements or your accomplishments. So I still have that. When I said there's still parts of me that are the same, I still have that person inside of me that sometimes I'm happy I do, sometimes I wish I didn't, where I struggle sometimes with going, you know what? I'm doing good things. I'm doing big things. Like, it's hard for me to just sit with that. But at the same time, when I get messages from people, and these days, partly because the new book's out and partly because of the work that we do with our Blue Talks brand, but it's usually common to have 1 or 2 comments a day. Like, just want to let you know this, and whatever this is, like, because of what you did, I just landed my TED Talk, and now I'm living a dream that my parents said I could never do. That type of thing.
Oh, wow.
Or with the book, it could be like stuff that really is humbling. Like, okay, I'll give you a great example, and it's just super short example. But I sent an email a few days ago and said, do you believe in synchronicity? Was the header. And then it talked about synchronicity. And one of the replies, and she said I could screenshot it and use it so I can say her name. Her name is Lisa Demi. She's another speaker. Her reply was, when I said, do you believe in synchronicity? She said, now that I've read your book, I do.
Oh, interesting.
So the point is that from an impact point of view, not saying people should believe in synchronicity or not, but that's a big deal to say that somebody's saying, I now believe in meaningful coincidences and not just coincidences.
Yeah.
Like, that took me years, like literally years. And somebody saying, I read your book and now I'm in. And what I'm saying is, to me, that's impact. Like, if you can, somebody can tell you, you changed my way of thinking about something that's so monumental that people have arguments over whether or not things are really happening for you or whether it's just a coincidence happening to you. And that's a big deal. And so it's not lost on me, but I will say, after I shake it off, like, you get that comment, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so humbling. It takes me about 5 minutes and then I'm right back to what I'm doing. Like, I don't sit in it enough. I don't think I don't sit in the juices of that enough. And so I recognize that I'm having an impact, but I probably don't sit with it enough to realize that that's significant, because of the fact that that's the visible impact, and we never really ever fully know the invisible impact.
Yes.
A weird comparison or a story is, years ago I went to Jimi Hendrix's gravesite in Seattle, and while we were there was this guy pulled up in a red car with gloves on, jumped out, cleaned around Hendrix's gravesite, jumped back in the car, and drove off. And I said to my wife at the time, well, first of all, he doesn't work for the graveyard, because otherwise he's doing a horrible job. He only cleaned one place. But obviously he probably lives in Seattle and he was impacted by Hendrix. But I said, do you think Hendrix thought, when he played music for 3 real years, 2.5, 3 real years, that 43 years after his death, by the way, that now would be 7 or 8 years ago, but at the time, 43 years after his death, he'd still be having somebody go clean his gravesite that lives nearby? That's the invisible impact that we never know. Really also in the same day with the Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee's gravesite. How many people do I think Bruce Lee has impacted in the world? Millions and millions.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But again, whenever he started, and even while he was doing it, he probably had no fathom of that ripple, and the fact that, again, 50 years later, we'd still be talking about it. So, I think
that's
visible and visible.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful segue into your book, The Enlightened Passenger. Tell us more about that, because everything you've said is really leading up to that as well.
Yeah, so the book, in terms of what the book's about, first and foremost, this is a fictional parable. It's, again, this is the hard part for me to soak in and even acknowledge, but it's been compared by quite a few people to the Celestine prophecy, to the Alchemist, and then to Og Mandino's many books. In fact, I did this live interview that I mentioned with Richard Paul Evans and Mark Victor Hansen last Friday. And Richard, as I mentioned, wrote the foreword, and he talked about how he had a chance to meet Og Mandino years ago in a mall when he was a young kid, I think he was like 20, and he always regretted that he never went over. He said Og was at a table with nobody in front of him, which would be rare.
Oh gosh, wow.
I don't know how
wow.
early it was in Og's career, but in the tailor end of his career, you'd be hard pressed to get in a place with less than 600 people lined up. And he said he was sitting there, and this author who he was in awe of, and he didn't go over and talk to him. But my point is, he brought that up because he said the book is very Og-like. And he actually said about the book, he said, Corey, if you don't write this book, I'm going to write it. So you better hurry. And that's 46 times New York Times bestselling author. But to me, the bigger compliment is he's a huge fan of Og, and he said, this is Og-like. And then we had Mark Victor Hansen on the show, and Mark knew Og personally. And he said, Crystal and I just read your book, and it's so Og-like. So what I'm saying is, first of all, to set the stage, it's that type of book. And what that type of book is a fictional parable. You could argue whether it's a spiritual fictional parable or there's components of that. I'll leave that to the reader to decide. But the story is of two passengers on a plane. Old passenger named Treb, young passenger named Robert. Robert books the flight in first class, pays for the seat next to him, doesn't want anybody sitting next to him, falls asleep, wakes up, Treb sitting next to him, the older, wiser man. Treb is very charismatic, almost like I don't want to talk to this guy, but look, he's so cute. Like he's very charismatic. So Robert, the idea is he found out that Treb was bumped because the flight was full. So he's like, I'm going to go to sleep and ignore this old guy. Yeah. But somehow within the first couple of minutes, like Treb's like, well, tell me about yourself. And, like he's just engaging, and he ends up, somehow Robert gets wind of the fact that Treb's made money. And that's the one thing Robert's interested in, because Robert, it's described as he makes a lot of money, but he spends it just as quick. So he's like, how can I make more of it? He thinks and that's how a lot of us think when we're younger. I just need to make more. Not how can I spend less? I need to make more. So he's like, what can I learn from this old geezer who's made money? That's kind of his thinking. And ultimately what happens is called The Flight That Changes Everything, because what happens is instead of Robert learning about how to become rich financially, he learns how to become rich as a person from Treb. So it's the 10 life lessons that Treb shares during the flight, and they're loosely based on what I've learned during those interviews we talked about. It's loosely based on my life in the sense that the two characters I realized after I wrote it, each are like a half of me. So like Robert,
interesting,
he's a young, arrogant, he's arrogant. I wasn't arrogant, but he's like that know-it-all. Yeah. I was like that. I didn't know what self-help was or personal development. Yeah. And then Treb is the guy that's further along the journey, and I like to think I'm heading toward him. And here's where it's even truly like tagged for my life is Treb. It talks about when he performed stand-up comedy when he was younger. Treb talks about when he played music at the Cavern Club where the Beatles played. Yeah. Treb talks about, I don't know if you can see it here, his John Lennon tattoo he got in Liverpool.
Oh, cool, yeah.
So it's nice, kind of upside down, but I got that tattoo in Liverpool. Well, Treb talks about that experience. So like I pull stuff from my life and then fictionalize it. Because you've interviewed some of them, you'll appreciate this probably, but if I interviewed Les Brown in his living room in Atlanta and he said synchronicity is God's way of staying anonymous, I brought that into the book as if Treb was sharing the bill with Les, and he told Les said it in the green room to him. So that's the book in a nutshell. Two passengers on a plane around a flight that changes everything based on an older, wiser passenger teaching life lessons to a younger, more naive passenger.
So all the advice and all the help, if you will, is all things you've learned from the people you've interviewed, so it's all sprinkled in there as well. So like you said, Les Brown, that comment, all that's sprinkled in throughout the conversation. So that's wonderful. That's really interesting because you see so many different perspectives and so much knowledge and wisdom that goes into the conversation. That's brilliantly done.
Oh, thank you. And I will say, very prestigious, I'll say brilliant writer, actually told me I should take those aspects out. He felt that, he felt like I shouldn't reference like modern day leaders. It should just be my story and stuff. And my whole brand, as you know, in a lot of ways, James, has been built around the interviews I've done, what lessons I've learned, how I share them. To me, it felt more on brand to leave it in. And so I left it in. But I will say somebody thought I should remove it altogether, but I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the hardest thing, because we have well-intentioned people, brilliant people, really good at their craft, and give us information. And if it doesn't resonate, that's hard. I mean, that's, for you to say the no or yes, I mean, be that type of person that's an opportunity for you to practice. Do I say, yes, I agree with you, or no, I don't? And so I'm sure, in that moment you had to really decide what's on brand for you, what makes sense for you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's totally what I had to look at is, because this book, here's the funny part. That was on brand, but the book itself, and this is kind of sounds weird, the book itself isn't on brand. So what I did, the approach in the book I took, I feel is on brand. But when I say the book isn't on brand, it's a fictional parable. And James, honestly, it's really hard to have a quote unquote back end business that have a fictional parable. And most of the rest of what I've done has always been congruent. Like, in other words, I put in a book on how to get paid to speak because I help people get paid to speak. Well, putting in a book on ultimately how to get people to become more enlightened by being open to learning is not really where I spend most of my speaking time. That part was unique, but I also feel you have to listen to what people call them God winks. It doesn't matter, higher power nudges, whatever you want to call it. I felt like this story came to me for a reason. I felt like it was channeled through me, and I felt like it would be irresponsible to not listen.
Yes. Well, I am super excited to read it as well. Unfortunately, our time is up. Corey, if my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you, to work with you, to learn more about Blue Talks, because I send a lot of people to you as well through the show. But if they want to learn more about that and about your book, The Enlightened Passenger, where will they find all this information online?
So I usually don't like to give two places because I always say, what do they say? A confused mind doesn't act or does nothing. But so I'd like to not go like, here's 12 links, because I see people do that a lot. Okay. So what I'll say is the main one, and if you go to this one, you'll get the book and you'll also be in my community. So you'll get access to all the other stuff we're doing anyway and hear about it. But the main one is, if you want to get a copy of the book, that's at pretty easy website to remember. thisisthebook.com. So thisisthebook.com. The great part about getting it there, James, is that you get 5 instant bonuses and some other bonuses as well. Because basically you go there, it tells you the steps 1 to 3. You just pick your preferred retailer, grab the book, bring back the order number, plug it in, and we can give you the instant bonuses. Perfect. You can still go buy it at retail. Awesome. The problem is we won't know you bought it and we can't send any bonuses. Yeah. So if you get it through the site, that's the bonus of that. The second part, which is easier, is if you want to chat with me, learn more about Blue Talks, all that kind of stuff, I'll give you an easy email. So first one's a website. This one's an email. You can send me a direct email at Corey, which is Corey, at Blue, which is BLU, no E, talks with an S on the end, .com. So Corey at bluetalks.com. Shoot me an email. Let me know you heard me on the show here with James, and whether you want the link to the book through there, or you want to chat about Blue Talks, or you just want to say, hey, any of those options work. So I'm just an email away.
Awesome. Well, my viewers and listeners also know that if I can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmiller.lifeology.com and have all the information that Corey just spoke about. So Corey, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your expertise and time.
Thank you so much, James. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone.